What is up, fantasy people? Welcome back to the True North Fantasy Pod. I am Trav, coming live from a secret location within the True North Fantasy lair. Back in the lab with me, co-hosting and West Coasting is Tyrell McLaughlin. It has been a minute, my man. Good to be back.
It really is. It really is. And it really has been a minute. Living the dream, as always.
Of course, of course. You can find us mobbing on Twitter from time to time, and our handles will be in the description. But most importantly, go follow True North FFB and at TNFF Pod on Twitter, and True North FFB on the gram as well. And TrueNorthFFB.com is the place where the whole gamut resides. Find all of the team's content there. And we're a part of the Fantasy Points Media Group, Ty, and it is a good time to subscribe.
Yes, fantasypoints.com, an essential resource in the offseason to put on your tool belt of resources for fantasy football. And, you know, if you're doing best balls, if you're a dynasty person, whatever it is, even if you're just a big fan of the NFL draft that's upcoming, I think an invaluable resource is fantasypoints.com, and all the best players are utilizing that resource.
Yeah, man. Our promo code TrueNorth22 is in full effect now, and it will get you 10% off the already 20% off you can get with the early bird special. So right now it's 30% off with our promo code, and that's only for about a week longer. You can stack that. Something really cool that's happening behind the scenes for Fantasy Points, Ty, is they are revamping the entire Discord channel and going to make it more interactive and kind of dial it in to specify where specific content lies within the Discord. And it's a ton of fun getting in there and chatting. It is bumping. Sometimes it's just like crazy to follow all the conversations and whatnot, but I love diving into the Discord channel and chatting with everybody over there. So please go check it out. There's tons of articles being dropped. Pre-orders are on for the 2022 prospect guide at fantasypoints.com. So listen to the True North Fantasy podcast, couple that with your subscription to the fantasypoints.com. Huge bucket of content there, and you're gonna win in 2022, Ty. I'm already deep into best ball drafts, like you said. Tons of crazy value shifts over the last couple of weeks, and that's what we're gonna talk about tonight. And we're doing a little series for these episodes, Ty. We're gonna talk about the free agency and trade impacts that we've seen across the NFL, and this week we're gonna start with wide receivers. We're gonna go through the positions, so you'll see those episodes dropping in the next kind of week or two here, and it's gonna be fun to dive in because there's been a lot of movement. And I think wide receiver, if running back is kind of the most important position in fantasy, I think wide receiver might be the sexiest position because of the deep player pool. And I'm pretty excited to dive into it with you, Ty.
Yeah, I think wide receiver is the easiest position to get right in fantasy as well.
Yeah.
So it's important to have a good grip of these guys because you can really wield that power come fantasy draft season.
Yeah, for sure. And
which is all year round if you're a best ball to gen.
Absolutely. And and I feel wide receiver, it's sometimes the hits are a little bit more glorious because you'll get that guy in the 5th and the 6th round and he'll break out into that top 15. And we're going to dive into some guys who could do just that. I'm not going to waste very much time, Ty. I'm going to run through a couple of the returnees just to get those off the plate. The guys that went back to their old teams, maybe not as high level impact as some of the other guys we want to dive deeper into. But Sterling Shepard went back to the New York Giants. Allen Lazard actually is looking like he has some decent opportunity with Green Bay, depending on what they do. I'm a little bit in hold mode on that right now because I'm waiting to see if they add more at the position. You got to think they're going to. Randall Cobb actually back with Green Bay after Aaron Rodgers signed that big contract, of course. Josh Reynolds and Khalif Raymond both re-signed in Detroit after Detroit signed DJ Chark. And Amon-Ra, everybody likes some Amon-Ra. I think Josh Reynolds has had pesky production across all the teams that he's been on, the Rams and then now Detroit. So it'll be interesting to see how he impacts that DJ Chark signing. Braxton Berrios back to the Jets. We know our guy, Big Willie style, loves him some Braxton Berrios.
Slight downgrade from Tyreek, but
yeah, absolutely. The Jets were a team that were in the running for Tyreek Hill. I think one that I want to talk a little bit about here, Ty, is a fan favorite here at the True North Fantasy Podcast. Chris Godwin going back to Tampa Bay probably slots right in as one of those borderline top 12 guys for 2022, eh?
Yeah, I mean, we'll have to monitor his health leading up to the regular season, but with Brady back, I think so too is Godwin's wide receiver 2 label at the very least. And there's definitely upside baked into that label as well for Chris Godwin. He's kind of interesting because Mike Evans is certainly the top target in this offense once the Bucs get close to the opponent's red zone, but I think Chris Godwin's a good bet to lead this team in targets in any given week. I think what I'll be interested to look at is how do they deploy him? You know what I mean? He's played in the slot for at least 63% of his snaps in each of the past 3 seasons. Godwin's top 5 in yards after the catch per game played during that span amongst wide receivers. But you have Russell Gage signing here, which we might touch on in a little bit. Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see how Godwin's used. Maybe, he plays less in the slot. Maybe he accumulates his yards less after the catch. But in this vertical offense with Tom Brady at the helm, and even with the health concerns heading into 2022, I'm still taking Godwin as a wide receiver 2, right around names like Keenan Allen, Deontay Johnson, guys like that. I think he'll go in a range of the draft where we should be hammering wide receivers too. So, the guy who was wide receiver 6 overall last year in points per game, he was wide receiver 7, I believe, when he went down in week 15. And that was all despite ranking outside the top 40 in weighted opportunity. So I think he'll be able to flex this versatility that I'm kind of painting the picture of in 2022. Yeah. He just has to stay healthy. But a wide receiver 2 bordering on wide receiver 1 territory, definitely in Dynasty. He's more of a wide receiver 1 back-end guy. Mm-hmm. Redraft, maybe a wide receiver 2 just because of all the weapons that need to be fed in that offense.
For sure. And I'm kind of right in line with you there. You mentioned Deontay and Keenan Allen. I'm a little bit bullish on Chris Godwin, where I would probably have him at the top of that tier, but I would echo all of the sentiments that you just kind of laid out there, that he has that versatility. And Russell Gage is an interesting one to come in, and we will get into that in a little bit, Ty. But another guy who returned to his team was Mike Dubs, Mike Williams. Also, Jalen Guyton went back to the Los Angeles Chargers, which is a little bit of a downgrade for our guy, Josh Palmer, as well, but we'll see how it shakes out there. I think we actually said on our wide receiver State of the Union episodes that best case Ontario for Mike Williams was to go back to the Chargers with Justin Herbert in that division where there's going to be shootouts, especially for fantasy purpose, obviously, and for real football purposes. Great spot to be in for him. What do you think about Mikey Dubs going back there? Do you think good move? Huge contract, huge. Yeah. Him and Keenan Allen are both actually top 5 annually paid wide receivers in the league, and both of them are at $20 million, I believe.
And they're one of the best wide receiver corps in football there in Los Angeles, with even Jalen Guyton come back and Joshua Palmer in the wings. But yeah, I mean, he was one of the best picks you could have made on paper last year. He was wide receiver 12, I believe, in PPR leagues last season, drafted as like the wide receiver 42. But he will be far more expensive this year, probably costing you like a 5th round pick in your fantasy draft. And I just think you need to know that Mike Williams will be a very boom or bust option from week to week. Last year, Mikey Dubb was the wide receiver 1 overall after 5 games this season. That was in half PPR, I believe. He was a wide receiver 29 from week 6 on. And I believe he had over 22 PPR points in 4 of the first 5 games last year, a feat he failed to accomplish once over the next 10 games of the fantasy season. So definitely a boomer bust season. I think like 65% of his points came in just those 5 games. Those were his 5 wide receiver 1 performances. And he had 7 games last year where he registered under 10 PPR points. So I like Mike Williams. The problem is you're going to have to possibly pay wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 prices for him. And he's in a powerhouse offense, like Chargers were 5th highest scoring offense last year, 4th in yards, 5th in completed air yards. So a lot of the skill sets align. But Mike Williams, I think, has to maintain a lot of strong market share when it comes to air yards and especially end zone targets. So I think, maybe there's an argument I could make for a little bit of regression to the mean in terms of him ranking so high in end zone targets, but actually having a lot of guys finish ahead of him in end zone touchdowns. So I think touchdowns are the way that he could compensate for what probably is a dip in market share in terms of 30% of the air yards, 30% of the end zone targets last year. Those are just hard to repeat numbers, and as guys like Jalen Guyton get more comfortable in the offense, and someone like Joshua Palmer maybe
Yeah.
breaks out a little bit, it could be at the expense of Mike Williams.
Yeah, 100%. And the guy that we're going to talk about when we talk about tight ends, Gerald Everett went there, which is an interesting little landing spot. He could be a bit of a red zone weapon for that team as well. So remains to be seen how that affects Mike Dubs. But I think it's more than likely that he does get the lion's share of that wide receiver 2 work. Like, I don't think that Jalen Guyton and Josh Palmer are going to eat into him a ton, much like what we saw last year. I think it's going to be a little bit of a repeat. And like you said, there's a little bit of room for kind of regression to the mean in the touchdown department for Mikey Dubs. So I like that there, Ty. And he definitely is like a 4th or 5th round pick in best balls right now, and I don't have very much exposure to him in the drafts that I've been in, just because that's a little pricey for me compared to the guys that are around him. Like a guy like Chris Godwin that we were talking about, like getting close to the same neighborhood as far as draft price, but I would go Godwin all day personally. Speaking of best ball, Ty, we're going to get into some of these big trades that happen, but I want to talk about our friends over at Underdog. I've been deep in the best ball drafts, so I would be remiss if I didn't let our listeners know that they can go over to Underdog Fantasy right now, and our promo code TNFF will get them an instant match up to $100 on their first deposit. And honestly, the drafts are hot and heavy right now. There is a tournament called the Big Board Superflex right now that's a lot of fun to get into. Dialing in that Superflex value is the best way to get into get tuned into these values, is to get into best ball drafts even early throughout the off season, and you'll be really dialed into that, Ty. So you've always preached it, and I'm just kind of starting to adopt it a little bit more this off season, and that's thanks to our partnership with Underdog. I've had a lot of fun on that platform. I'm really excited about us doing some live best ball episodes potentially coming up soon. So please, if you want to have as much fun as we do and support the show by supporting Underdog, our promo code TNFF will get you that instant match up to $100 on your first deposit. So as I always say, you drop a hundy, you get another hundy, and you got a cool 2 C notes to play with on Underdog Fantasy. They got props and stuff throughout the season, other sports as well, MMA, hockey, baseball, all that jazz. So tons of fun over there on Underdog. So thanks to them. We appreciate the partnership with them. And so, Ty, we're going to get into some of these trades happening because it's
Speaking of partnerships.
Yeah, no doubt. Partnerships across the NFL, which have been buck wild. I don't think I recall an offseason quite like this. I know Greg Rosenthal of NFL.com lore, he called it the trade tsunami, and I always kind of like that because it just feels like a bit of a whirlwind. Some of this news is happening, like we hear rumors that something might be in the works, like the one we're going to talk about with Tyreek Hill here. And like within hours of hearing these rumors, boom, he's gone. Tyreek Hill traded to Miami. And like I said, that one happened fast, Ty. And Miami's kind of loading up right now like they're an AFC West squad. I will give them that. They do have the Bills in their division that they have to compete with. And then the Patriots are always pesky there. And of course, the Jets are trying to be on the come up themselves. And first thing I thought of with this signing was you got a feel for Cedric Wilson and Trent Sherfield. Sherfield came over with Mike McDaniels from San Francisco, thinking he might be getting a shot in a familiar offense. Cedric Wilson just got signed from Dallas to Miami. They were looking to carve out a role, but obviously Tyreek Hill, much like he does to defenses, dashed their dreams. But I think like for real, when we get down to like a fantasy perspective, having those two guys on the same squad, Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, is going to be absolutely nasty for defenses to plan against. I'm not 100% sure what I think about it for fantasy yet. My first thought was that I don't necessarily love it, just because I think from a short-term perspective, especially, they do a lot of the same things. And I think with McDaniel coming in, and maybe like people get too rigid on that he's coming from a Shanahan offense, and I might be guilty of that as well, but didn't really expect them to be pass heavy enough to support what people want from Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill. So I think like if they're going to reach some ceiling, then they're going to have to go a little bit more pass heavy. I'm curious to hear what you think, though. Do you think they're going to kind of go that way a little bit more so than what we thought McDaniels was going to bring over? Or is it going to be not necessarily top 5 in the league, but still enough to support these guys?
I think they'll be a little more of a balanced offense than they were last year. Like, I think they'll try to run the ball with McDaniels. They definitely signaled that's what their plan is with some of their offseason acquisition. They've acquired running backs and running backs that are familiar with the system and kind of their skill sets align with the outside zone scheme and everything. So I think McDaniels wants to run the ball, and they've definitely shored up that offensive line or are doing their best to, do that. So I think they'll try to run the ball, but they could use their passing game as an extension of the run game. We saw such a low average depth of target from Tua last year. We could see much of the same, but with two dynamic weapons who could be on the receiving end of those targets in Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. And I think the other huge loser in this is Mike Gesicki, no doubt about it.
Yeah, Mike Gesicki or the running back target share as well for me. Like I think you mentioned that short average depth of target. I think that could get a little bit of a boost up. And in that case, I think the running back target share with Chase Edmonds coming in, I think there is going to be a little bit of that pass catching work kind of baked in there. But I kind of wonder if that might be impacted alongside Mike Gesicki. But I definitely think Gesicki is the biggest loser. I think what we're going to see is probably a funnel offense to those two guys, and Gesicki falls off a little bit. That's the hope, at least, right?
Fingers crossed there.
That's the hope.
And I think the offensive line is the X factor. Like, I think it all trickles down from if they're able to protect Tua, then we could probably see Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill operate more in the intermediate and in the deep part of the field. So it's going to be interesting. Like, Tyreek Hill, it was a pretty crazy deal to see. And, like, he got a pretty crazy deal paid-wise, too. We'll see how that ends up working out in the long run. But he has at least 70 yards receiving per game in each of the last 5 seasons. He scored 53 times in his previous 75 games. He's a dynamic player. And that touchdown upside is the biggest expectation shift I think we need to make with him going from Kansas City to Miami. The other thing is the efficiency and stuff. Like, he blew past his career high in receptions last year, Tyreek Hill, but we saw his efficiency come way down. Like, he barely averaged 11 yards per reception after averaging over 15.5 yards per reception over the previous 4 seasons. His average depth of target came down a bit, but his yards after the catch per reception stayed pretty much the same. So I think, like, his yak upside, by the way, for Tyreek Hill might be a little bit overrated. Like, he's a career 5 yards after the catch per reception guy. And over the last 3 years, he's averaged 4.9, and last year 4 yards after the catch per reception. That is not elite territory whatsoever. So I think the manufactured touches will still be there for Tyreek Hill and for Jalen Waddle for that matter. But the volume, like, what I'm saying is the volume isn't really something I'm worried about with Tyreek Hill. The touchdowns are something I definitely am worried about with Tyreek Hill now, but to be a wide receiver one, we just need Tyreek to get back to that, like, elite level of efficiency. He just needs to add more after the catch, I think, in this new location, because he could be the exclusive deep threat for this team as well. But I just don't know what that's going to be worth. Even if because they might want to, they have a decent defense. That offensive line looks better. Like, it might be more confined offense than we're kind of anticipating in that passing game. Like, it might be a pretty one-dimensional, low average depth of target offense with some play action deep shots. Yeah.
For sure. And I think there's still definitely production to be had. There's no doubt about that. And, like, I still have Tyreek as my wide receiver 10. Jalen Waddle's back at my wide receiver 19. I could flip-flop those two potentially, depending, but I think Tyreek kind of, for me, is just above Jalen Waddle in the pecking order with the big trade and the big contract. But like you said, like, the volume is definitely going to come down. Tyreek has averaged 144 targets the last 3 seasons with the Kansas City Chiefs, where he's played more than 12 games. So that's definitely going to come down. And like you said, these guys are going to have to kind of exceed on efficiency, but I think they have the profiles to do it, right? Like, I think these guys can both do it on big plays. You're talking about Tyreek's yards after the catch, and I always thought his were a little bit different in that his are down the field. He's beat his defender by 5 yards. He makes the catch and he runs for 30 more yards. You know what I mean? As opposed to always cats in the True North Fantasy layer, folks. It's never dull. Yeah. Some dogs and kids, sometimes it just gets buck wild in here. But yeah, I think these are two guys who could soak up like 50% of this team's targets by the end of the season. And I think it could be good.
Waddle definitely. I think you nailed it with Tyreek's a back end wide receiver 1 now instead of like a possible elite wide receiver for fantasy, and Waddle's probably a wide receiver too. It's sad because he just seems so poised for a big breakout, and like with Jalen Waddle, his season was so based. It was so on the back of volume, how he accomplished what he did last year in PPR leagues, especially. And you just know that volume's going to come down, along with the possibility that the Dolphins just pass the ball a lot less this year, and with the new coaching staff and a decent defense to go along with that offensive line, we're talking about adding some new running backs and all that. So it's just tough because we're left with these super talented wide receivers who are kind of at the mercy of Tua taking a really big leap, because you're going to have to pay up for both of these guys. And that's kind of tough because we thought that might happen last year, and now he's got a new playbook, and it's definitely to his time to shine here. There's no more excuses. I'm sure you've heard that on Twitter or whatever, but it's true.
Once or twice.
Like, it's really true. Like, it's put up or shut up time for Tua, so long as he stays healthy this year.
Yeah.
And the thing is, Tua's the big winner here, right? Like, for
100%.
fantasy, like, Tua's the big winner.
100%. He moves from like streamer territory into like a guy who I would start as the quarterback 2 on my Superflex team weekly, and a guy who I might consider if I punt quarterback as somebody who can give you some big weeks with some big like 3 or 4 touchdown weeks because of these guys who can kind of pop the top off of defense. So I think that was pretty well wrapped up there. Another trade that happened, which was definitely less pricey for the team acquiring the guy, that would be the Cleveland Browns getting Amari Cooper. He comes to Cleveland as it seems like they're kind of trying to retool on the fly. Like, they've got a really good defense, and so I don't think they want to necessarily have to rebuild. And obviously that is the proof is in that pudding when they went and got Deshaun Watson, which we'll break down on our quarterback episode 100%. But Amari kind of comes to Cleveland after that trade. Jarvis was released, and obviously they had that glaring need at the wide receiver position. And I think getting Amari Cooper for a 5th and a 6th round pick is not bad work from the Cleveland Browns, because he is somebody that can soak up a lot of targets and produce, especially in a real football sense, even if he might be a little inconsistent from a fantasy football lens, having that on things. So they took on the contract from Dallas, but I guess they could take it on, and they got a good deal on it. So Deshaun Watson is a huge factor in what we think of Amari Cooper. Now, remember, Amari Cooper was acquired before they went out and got Deshaun Watson. So we were kind of already trying to settle his value in with Baker Mayfield as his quarterback. And now Deshaun Watson comes into the fold, and that changes things. But do you see the Browns? Like, I think the main thing with the Browns, they've been so run heavy the past few years, that they've been another team that's been a funnel to maybe 2 guys, more so 1 guy actually the last season or 2. Do you see them passing the ball more with Deshaun Watson and now Amari Cooper coming in there? They have Donovan Peoples-Jones and Anthony Schwartz as well, and I would expect them to bring somebody else in. Apparently there's some interest in Will Fuller, but do you think there is going to be a big offensive shift for the Cleveland Browns?
No, I think the scheme is pretty locked in there, and I don't think that has to deter us from trying to draft somebody like Amari Cooper, or definitely not Deshaun Watson. I think Deshaun Watson was in a pretty run-heavy scheme under Bill O'Brien in Houston. Like, they ran the ball a ton there, so I think efficiency is the name of the game with him. And as for Amari Cooper, like, maybe I'll save it for when we talk to Deshaun Watson, and we can talk about David Njoku and some of these guys that I do like and why I like them in this offense. But for now, like, I think Amari Cooper is somebody that I'll probably still avoid. We'll see. We'll definitely have to monitor his ADP and, the trajectory it's on. Mm-hmm. But you mentioned inconsistencies. It's just so beyond the pale. You know what I mean? Like, it's he's going to score 30 to 40% of his fantasy points, even upwards of 50% of his fantasy points in just 3 games next year. It's what he does every single year. It's, it's just an exact science with Amari Cooper. So what I think is actually really interesting about this deal is on the other side of it, like Amari Cooper being dealt for such little, by the Dallas Cowboys, who we've kind of entrusted with Kellen Moore and everything. So, maybe we could talk about that a little bit, because like the Cowboys scored over 30 points per game. They're the highest scoring offense in football last year, and they're the most yards on offense in football. So I was wondering, like, what do you think this does for Dak? Do you think Dallas is going to change their identity on offense at all?
No, I don't actually. I think Dak is going to be just fine. And I think this team is just like, on paper, it just looks like they went a tier down with losing Amari. And they brought in James Washington from your Steelers, who I think is actually a guy who I'm getting in some of my later rounds of best balls, just because he's on that Dallas offense. And I honestly think like CeeDee Lamb is major getting sleeped on by the fantasy community there. So for Dak, I think he's going to be fantastic. But the guy who I'm dialing in is CeeDee Lamb, because I think I have him as like my wide receiver 5 or 6 for this coming season. I am expecting that full breakout in this Dallas offense. He's going to take some of Amari's pie on top of the pie that he's already been munching on there, taking a page from Zeke's book, right? Been hanging out and packing in the pie, I guess. But I think CD is the guy who is going to be the biggest beneficiary of Amari leaving, because he's going to take over fully that alpha role. And yeah, I think I am very confident in what he can do with it and becoming that. But I don't think a lot of people, I think a lot of people just kind of dog him a little bit, just not thinking that he's going to have the full breakout because he didn't do it in 2021. But the stars just didn't align for him, and he was only a second-year wide receiver, so let's cut the guy a little slack.
No kidding.
Because coming out of the draft, the hype was massive on CeeDee Lamb, and I don't think he's done anything for me to deter me from that same hype that I had on him coming out of the draft.
No, I think the third-year breakout is imminent for CeeDee Lamb. I think I have him as a top 5 wide receiver in redraft, best ball, dynasty, all formats right now. Like my wide receiver 5, I think in my best ball ranks, I just updated. He was the wide receiver 8 last season from weeks 1 to 10. And then he was the wide receiver 39 from weeks 11 on. And he didn't score a single touchdown over the final 7 games, which I think is just kind of an anomaly from the highest scoring offense in football. But Lamb did, lead the league's best offense in targets, catches, yards per reception, yards after the catch, forced missed tackles in the pass game, you name it. Like, led Dallas in contested catches. The reason I think the touchdowns will come is because Amari is gone, too. Like, Amari and Lamb had 10 and 9 end zone targets in 2021 respectively, so 19 total, which is about as many as the rest of the team had combined last year. So CD could end up with just a stranglehold on the Cowboys end zone targets. You mentioned the pre-draft process. We all remember the contortion, the catch he made at the I could do that. At the combine drills that really lit up Twitter. That was one to remember. And the Cowboys could just have more end zone targets available this year, so long as this offense continues to hum, which I think we both think it will, because they led the NFL in so many offensive categories, but they were just 8th in red zone trips. So yeah, I think an increase in volume for CeeDee Lamb to the point where we could say CD is seeing like elite volume.
Yeah, like 150 plus.
Yeah, and the special season I think could easily be achieved with a spike touchdown season being the catalyst.
Absolutely.
What about Dalton Schultz really quick, Trav? Like, how high is too high for Dalton Schultz?
Fucking fire him up, man. I think I'll check my rankings and my tight end best ball rankings right now, but I think I definitely have him in my top 10. I think
off top, you're gonna have Mark Andrews, Kyle Pitts, Travis Kelce,
8.
Waller, Kittle.
I got him at 8.
Yeah, so you have Hawkinson ahead of him as well.
Yeah, Goddard,
and
Waller.
Homer has Goddard. I would imagine. Yeah.
Yeah, Homer has Goddard. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I think I have him. The only difference is I have Goddard like just below him there.
And that's
Schultz
fair.
Ahead of him, and it's totally just that's a 100% situation thing. Like,
Same
I
tier.
think the Cowboys could be, they're a pass first offense, whereas the Eagles in that NFC East are a run first offense.
Absolutely.
They're the least pass heavy team in football.
Just a note on my tight end rankings here. It's been a minute since I updated them, and I'm going to move Dalton Schultz down, or Dawson Knox. Sorry, move Dawson Knox down, folks.
Oh, with OJ
and I just don't think that. And I think Jamison Crowder is a factor.
The Beasles is gone.
Yeah, but JC came in, man. You know what JC can do. And we might talk about that in a little bit here, but I think that was really well said about CD. And I think another huge beneficiary, obviously, is just James Washington coming in.
Yeah.
Like, he's got a quarterback who can sling it, and he's a deep ball guy. So if he's getting open and Dak sees him, he's going to have a nice little season, in my opinion. So,
and Michael Gallup, of course, will get a lot of love again.
Yeah, absolutely. And just buy into this Dallas offense. Tony P, Zeke, all of them. Just depending on cost, I would take pieces from any part of this offense. So the other big fish that got dealt was Davante Adams. Ty, this one was crazy. I think
it facilitated the Tyreek trade. You know what I mean? Like this, the wide receiver market was hot.
Absolutely, and so they pounced, and I think Vegas, they gave up a lot for Davante Adams, especially in the contract as well. But I think it was a really nice move to beef up this team. If, like, everybody else is beefing up their quarterback and you're kind of stuck with Derek Carr as your quarterback, why not bring probably the best possible weapon you could give to Derek Carr in the entire NFL is his former college wide receiver in Davante Adams. So I think that was a really nice get for them. Like I said, college teammates at Fresno State, and the Raiders last year were one of the most pass happy teams in the entire league. Derek Carr, I think he had over 680 pass attempts, which is a pretty hefty number, up near the top of the league. And of course, Josh McDaniels comes in and has the offensive mind at coach. I think he'll know how to feed his best players. Like, I still have Davante Adams. I think I've got him as like my wide receiver 6 for this coming season, because I think Derek Carr is going to know how to get the ball to Davante Adams. I think there could be maybe a little bit of touchdown upside kind of hit for Davante Adams, but it depends on what we see in the red zone. We saw Aaron Rodgers have that mind meld with Davante Adams, but I think, the Packers didn't have a Darren Waller on the team, and Derek Carr also has really good rapport with Darren Waller. So I'm curious, Ty, what do you think about the Adams fit? Like, it is a pretty solid spot for him with that quarterback familiarity that he has. Obviously, he wanted to go there. He's a California guy. So it's not far from Las Vegas, where the Raiders used to play. But what's your take on the whole deal?
Yeah, I think I think Davante Adams stays in that top 5 kind of elite tier, definitely for best ball and redraft ranks. But it hurts Darren Waller. There's no question.
Mm-hmm.
I still have him as a top 5 tight end, but his floor and ceiling is kind of in jeopardy with target hog Davante in town. He's averaged like almost 9 targets per game over the past 2 seasons. It's only behind Travis Kelce at the tight end position. It's 26% of the team's targets when he's been healthy. And Waller has averaged over 70 yards receiving per game in those 2 seasons. So there's just no way to sustain that with Davante Adams coming in. I think Adams just vacuums up so many targets, so many touchdown opportunities, so many slot snaps, so much yard after the catch. Like, it's stuff Waller is relied on to put up elite numbers for fantasy at the tight end position. Luckily, though, like, tight end is a crapshoot, so Waller owner should still have a top 5 tight end, I think, in 2022 on their ends. It'll just be like a lower floor and ceiling, like I was saying, like in, whether he's been in the slot or split out wide as a true wide receiver, that's almost 50% of the time for Waller in his career. So maybe he goes and he could be relegated to lining up as an inline tight end more than 50% of the time in 2022. And those snaps are just less conducive to his skill set and fantasy points, for that matter. And there's no doubt this hurts Hunter Renfrow as well.
Oh, yeah.
I kind of have him buried in my ranks all of a sudden. I don't think he cracks the top 40 wide receivers in ADP going forward either. And then the big winner probably is Derek Carr somehow. Like, I'm not going to be running out to grab Derek Carr. Is kind of like he had so little with his legs. We know that Derek Carr will have to be an outlier of sorts. Is he on that Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers level? I'm just not ready to put him there. I'll probably even be taking the likes of Trey Lance and Jalen Hurts and maybe even Justin Fields, like, quarterbacks who are of that Konami code makeup over Derek Carr still. But Derek Carr definitely shot up my rankings. He's more in that Kirk Cousins range now. For me.
Absolutely, man. I actually have him right behind Kirk Cousins as the quarterback 17. And with Davante Adams, I could see him kind of flip-flopping up to the top of that little tier as a mid-range quarterback too.
Just thinking of really quick, they paid attention to the running back position in the offseason, the Raiders. They added some pass catchers to their backfield in particular. Do you think that the Raiders could be more of a pass-heavy team going forward? And do you think the age-old argument that I kind of subscribe to with poor offenses, and I hate to hear in really good offenses, but do you worry about the too many mouths to feed element existing in this offense in the passing game?
No, not necessarily, because I think those guys are just kind of ancillary. You know what I mean? I don't think they're going to take a big chunk of the targets. I think if anything, they probably just eat into what we were hoping Josh Jacobs was going to get and what Josh Jacobs was getting towards the end of the season. As far as target share, we saw what we finally wanted to see for Josh Jacobs in the last probably 8 games last season. But I don't know if we're necessarily going to see that. It was Brandon Bolden, and I can't recall the other name. Amir, baby.
Yeah.
Amir. Yeah, my man Amir Abdullah coming in for 75 targets this season. Book it.
No, I got the Drake.
Yeah, exactly. Drake, yeah. So I think those guys are just going to eat into a little bit more of Josh Jacobs, because what are the targets on this offense? Davante Adams, you nailed it. He's still in that top 5. Darren Waller, you nailed that for me. He just goes to kind of the bottom of that Kittle, Andrews, and Kyle Pitts tier, as opposed to being able to make a case maybe for him to be at the top of that tier. And then Hunter Renfrow, exactly like you said, I was checking my ranks. He is exactly the wide receiver 40 for me. So I don't necessarily think it's going to be too many mouths to feed, because I think Hunter Renfrow is kind of just going to be the guy that has to take the big hit.
It's more of an odd man out.
And I think if anything, those two, him and Darren Waller, might eat into each other kind of between the 20s, whereas Darren Waller in the red zone could eat into Davante Adams, you know what I mean? But I don't think he will that heavily that Davante will drop out of that top 5. So I don't think that's going to come into play for these guys, because I think some of those other additions are just going to fall off towards, quarter way to halfway into the season. Okie doke, Ty. So we wrapped up the Raiders there and Davante Adams. Robert Woods got traded to Tennessee. The Rams, they prioritized Allen Robinson in free agency. They still got Van Jefferson and, of course, the God Cooper Kupp. So Robert Woods is shipped off. Reliable Robert, shout out to Dan Bennett, was shipped off to Tennessee with the shuffling of the wide receiver deck for the Rams there. I think, unfortunately for Robert Woods, gone are the days of him being that disrespected top 15 wide receiver with some of that Konami code carry volume upside in Los Angeles. It's kind of funny you think about that. He was almost kind of Debo before it was cool to be Debo, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Taking all those carries and stuff. I'm not necessarily sure what I feel about the fit in Tennessee. I don't think I like it too much, just because I have a hard time seeing a second passing game weapon being consistently reliable on this offense with a healthy Derrick Henry. But I'm curious to hear what you think about him coming in there, because they tried the Julio experiment, but he couldn't stay healthy. Robert Woods coming off injury himself for the Tennessee Titans as the wide receiver 2 to A.J. Brown. What do you think about that fit, and what do you think about the production that we could see out of Robert Woods as the guy second on the totem pole?
Yeah, I kind of like the fit a little bit. I think he's going to be clearly behind A.J. Brown, but I think for fantasy, he's probably a wide receiver 3 or wide receiver 4. I like, I'm a big Robert Woods fan, so take everything I say with a grain of salt, but you're making the choice between guys like, maybe other veterans like a Michael Thomas or something in that range. Yeah. I think you might have to take him over some of the high variance wide receivers, like a Hollywood Brown or Devontae Smith maybe, but so you can see that I am still pretty high on Robert Woods. And if it wasn't, one of the least voluminous passing games in football that was the landing spot with the Titans here, I'd be even higher on Robert Woods. I think it's just so trippy to think, like, we don't want Julio Estuo, let's cut him, but we'll bring in Robert Woods, who, is getting shipped away because they wanted Allen Robinson in free agency, the spry Allen Robinson, who I'm sure we'll talk about in no time. But yeah, it was a weird deal, but I'll probably have a lot of Robert Woods in redraft and stuff. He probably goes around some of the very talented rookie wide receivers, so that might make it tough pre-NFL draft for me to scoop up a lot of shares in best ball or something. But post-NFL draft, I think I'll start scooping up a lot of Robert Woods shares. I just can't take Robert Woods over guys like Trey Burks and stuff right now.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just think, like, he couldn't be more clearly behind A.J. Brown, who does a lot of the same things. Like, he's a yards after catch kind of god himself. And, Robert Woods is going to be a low touchdown guy because A.J. Brown's there and Derrick Henry is there. Like, everything is a clear number 2 to the run game in Derrick Henry in Tennessee as it is. And, what I want to see is, were Robert Woods' spectacular numbers, especially after the catch, due to being in McVay's scheme?
Yeah.
Because that's definitely a byproduct of Sean McVay's passing game coming from LA there, which is also been Woods' bread and butter, is the yards after the catch. I mentioned that Godwin was 5th in wide receiver yards after the catch per game played over the past 3 seasons. Bobby Woods was 6th on that list. So
nice.
Scheme or talent, we'll see.
For sure. Yeah, I think it sounds like I have him maybe a tier or 2 below where you actually would have him for the next coming season. I do think the McVay offense was a big factor. Remember before Robert Woods came to the Rams, he was with the Buffalo Bills. Obviously, that was a shit era for the Buffalo Bills. Terrible offenses, but Robert Woods was kind of a run-of-the-mill guy before he came to the Rams. I'm not saying he's going to kind of sink down to that level, because I think with age and experience and, he's got a little bit more under his belt than that, you know what I mean? So I think he's going to be pretty solid in that wide receiver 3-4 kind of flex guy range, but I don't think he would be a guy who I want to rely on in my wide receiver 3 spot solidly, just because I think this is an offense where the situation kind of downplays the talent of these guys. Even, we haven't seen A.J. Brown hit the ceiling that I think his talent profile can hit. And I think a lot of that is due to this offense, maybe a little bit injury related, but I think the offense definitely just kind of caps that a bit. Okay, Ty, we're going to get into some more free agents there, but I do want to just do one last thank you to our friends at Trophy Smack. Level up your league with Trophy Smack. I don't have the belt here right now, Ty. It's just kind of put away right now, but you can get one of these belts, and they are fantastic at Trophy Smack. They have killer trophies. All of it is fully customizable. I think the Trophy Smack Twitter account showed a Scott Fishbowl style trophy with a fishbowl on it, and they had water and a goldfish in the bowl, which was fantastic. So it looks like there's something in the works for Scott Fishbowl with Trophy Smack. Obviously, they were on Shark Tank as well, and Mark Cuban teamed up and invested in the business, so that's really cool. And our promo code at Trophy Smack, TNFF, will get you a free championship ring with a trophy or a belt purchase. So go check them out. They're doing some crazy good things. They got a little content operation for fantasy football stuff going on right now. I was on there to do a little debate episode with Dave Kluge. So go check that out on their YouTube channel as well. But Trophy Smack doing great things. And our promo code TNFF can get you involved in leveling up your league with some of that hardware. So thanks a bunch to them. And thanks to all our sponsors. We love everybody, and we're super excited to go into another season with all of them. Okay, Ty, some more free agent switcheroos, and the guy that we were just talking about who kind of usurped Robert Woods' wide receiver 2 spot, I guess Odell kind of came in there and did that a little bit, but Robert Woods was injured. But Allen Robinson, and everybody was talking about how he was washed, but I think the Los Angeles Rams offense can really dress up what people might have thought was a turd previously. Allen Robinson coming in. Currently, I was just looking preliminary. I think I have him just a little bit outside my top 24 as the wide receiver 28, Ty. I'm going to keep kind of evaluating that as the season goes on. And you never know with the Rams. They could just be not done at the wide receiver position. If they could get Odell back on the cheap, that would be a nutty wide receiver core. But would you say that wide receiver 28 is fairly accurate for where Allen Robinson should be? Or am I maybe giving him a little bit too much credit for what he did before this ugly past season that he had in Chicago?
I'll probably have him as a wide receiver 3. I'll probably take, another veteran like Adam Thielen just ahead of him. I'd probably take a rookie like Treylon Burks ahead of him. I'd probably take, him over Michael Pittman. I don't know. I don't know. Yeah. But I'd probably even take guys like Gabriel Davis. I'd take Darnell Mooney, the guy who, is in Chicago. I think I'd take Darnell Mooney over him right now. So Allen Robinson's definitely more of a wide receiver 3, definitely for me. But Darnell Mooney, really quick, I wouldn't mind mentioning him just because he was the wide receiver 24 in PPR last year. He was the wide receiver 15 from weeks 4 on. Top 12 in air yards, top 12 in weighted opportunity. We got a new regime and coaching staff in Chicago. We expect a step for Justin Fields in year 2. And I think Mooney's skill set aligns nicely with what Justin Fields does best. So I really like Darnell Mooney in Chicago with Allen Robinson officially out the door. And them having been inactive, basically, for the wide receiver position in the offseason. Allen Robinson is interesting. Like, last year was brutal, and this is going to be A-Rob's 9th season in the league now. But heading into 2021, he was coming off back-to-back 1,100-yard seasons, and if there's one thing that defined A-Rob's career before last season, it was the absence of any semblance of decent quarterback play, right, throughout his entire career. So going to the Rams, being paired with Matthew Stafford, that has to be a dream come true, especially for dynasty owners. Like, they couldn't have asked for a better landing spot, especially with, Robert Woods on his way out. The thing about it is, it's a weird fit to me. Like, Allen Robinson doesn't add very much after the catch. If anything, he's definitely not doing what Robert Woods did in this offense, but he could come in and provide Stafford with another possession wide receiver, I guess, somebody who can help down and around the opponent's goal line, especially, and maybe show Van Jefferson some of the ropes while he's at it. So I'm not running to the podium to take Allen Robinson in my fantasy drafts this year, I don't think, but I do have him ranked as a wide receiver 3, and I think he deserves to enter the season as a potential starter for fantasy lineups.
Yeah, no, I'm with you there. I think, I'm curious because I hope there isn't a ton of impact to Cooper Kupp and his red zone target share and, touchdown prowess there. Obviously, I think there's going to be some regression in the touchdown department for Cooper Kupp, regression in every department for Cooper Kupp, just because there kind of has to be.
Well, they call them career years for a reason.
Yeah, exactly. So that's going to be his, obviously. And so I don't necessarily think when we see regression, it's going to be due to Allen Robinson, but I'm very curious to see how that shakes out and where some of that additional work that's left behind goes. And I think Allen Robinson is, he still has some of the tools to get it done. So we could see a little bit of a resurgent year. And I like what you said about Darnell Mooney there too. He's has everything lining up for him to have a great season. And I know that from somebody close to the team, Ty, that he's already working with Justin Fields this offseason, doing a bunch of training, getting a bunch of work in, and they're looking pretty good. So Darnell Mooney to the moon in Chicago, I guess, right?
And speaking of looking pretty good, just to touch on Van Jefferson, man, because he took a big...
It's like a cockroach, that fucking guy.
Well, he took a big step in his sophomore season. There's no doubt. He was second on the team in targets. I mean, Cooper Kupp still had well over twice as many as he did, but VJ caught 50 balls. He had over 800 yards. That's like 16 yards per reception. I think his average depth of target was like 14, and he scored half a dozen times. I just thought he had he's flexed some more versatility than I thought. Like, he's played in the slot just 35% of the time. So I think, which was second behind Cooper Kupp from, he had like just over 200 slaps from the slot last year, Van Jefferson. Robert Woods leaves about 150 of them. So I think he could like kind of slide into that role a little more. And he had the second most end zone targets on the team in 2021. I really like Van Jefferson, and I did not like him in the draft process. Same. So I think that's I just want to give him a shout out because I've definitely changed my mind on Van Jefferson over the last couple of years. And I just think the versatility, the talent, the offense makes Van Jefferson just a very good late round wide receiver target in fantasy.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I think I don't know if I've necessarily budged on what I think of Van Jefferson. I think Van Jefferson in Los Angeles with the Rams is what makes him good. I think on other teams that maybe didn't do as much work to get him the ball, he probably wouldn't shine quite as much. I think he did have a solid little season. I think to me, it kind of seems like they're always trying to bring in that guy who can kind of overshadow him, even though he's only been in the league for a couple seasons. It almost seems like they're trying to bring in that guy so they don't have to give Van that chance, but he stepped up in the chances that he got this past year. So I definitely will give him that with you.
And McVay will continue to exploit mismatches. I think if they're putting bad corners up against him, that's who they'll look for. And the other thing I think, you mentioned Cooper Kupp progressing and stuff like that. I think the big catalyst to that, and it should be mentioned as we're talking about Rams wide receivers, is that we expect the Rams to run the ball, I think, a lot more this year after just an injury-plagued season from the running backs in 2021.
Definitely. Cam Akers is going to come back with a full offseason healthy. And then, we love us some Darrell Henderson. So, yeah, I feel that, Ty. Okay, so we're going to talk about Juju here, and then we're going to start moseying on some of the next guys, Ty. Juju to Kansas City. He went there. And MVS signed today as well.
That too.
Yep, MVS, who has taken a lot of really nice deep shots from Aaron Rodgers in the past, now gets to go take some deep shots from Patrick Mahomes. So pretty good life for old MVS. Talking about Juju, though, he came there before the Tyreek Hill trade. And now things are looking a lot rosier for Juju in Kansas City. We're looking at Travis Kelce, probably Juju second on the totem pole, MVS and Hardman battling it out for that kind of electricity role. But yeah, Mecole Hardman, just when we thought there was an inkling of hope for him, they're trying to bring in other guys. I wouldn't be surprised if they weren't done at the position. They got old Flash Gordon still on the depth chart as well, I believe. And, he brings a lovely profile. We kind of always hope for the resurgence from him. But what do you think about Juju coming in? Because I always kind of trust your opinion on former Steelers because you're very dialed into the team and how their inner workings are going. So what do you think about the fit with Juju, and what do you think that kind of newfound upside is with Tyreek Hill out of the picture?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm just not the biggest Juju fan, I guess. I have not actually adjusted my rankings since the Tyreek Hill trade, to be honest.
Same.
So I probably have to move Juju up. You're right. But Juju is a part of the ripple effect from that Tyreek Hill trade. There's no doubt about it, especially because Tyreek played half his snaps in the slot, right? And that's where I think Juju will be playing. But the other ripple effect is that the Chiefs will now be, I think, key cogs going forward. It already happened today, but they're going to be key cogs in the wide receiver market, whether that's another trade that we see or using, one of their top picks or two on a wide receiver in the draft, or both. So I probably end up lower on Juju than consensus, and water is wet. It shouldn't be surprising for people to hear that if they know they followed our work or whatever. I mean, it would be interesting to see him on the field. I would have been more interested to see him on the field with Tyreek, to be honest, because it just would have been relatively similar dynamic to having Antonio Brown across from him in
very
Pittsburgh.
complimentary.
And, that's what happened in his spectacular rookie and sophomore seasons. But those very productive years at a very young age, it propelled him to top 5 dynasty startup territory in a lot of people's eyes. So needless to say, the dynasty community has a lot of Juju truthers and holders on for hope. So I definitely I want to let the dust settle in Kansas City before I go out and acquire a bunch of Juju shares, because I feel like this moment right now could be like peak value for Juju. Like I would be using this opportunity in dynasty to sell him.
Yeah.
And that is even after I accept or admit that this is a great landing spot. Like there's touchdown upside to capture for anybody in this offense. Juju can replace a lot of the snaps left behind by Tyreek Hill. So he could see some volume, and it's a marriage of Juju and his yards after the catch upside, I think, because Andy Reid and the Chiefs are just consistently among the league leaders in team yards after. Kansas City is top 3 in team yards after the catch in back to back seasons now. So it's a good landing spot.
Totally. And I think it's totally okay to say that he is a sell while knowing that he might have a really good season this coming year. Because if you look at what Kelsey and Tyreek have been doing the last few seasons, over the past 5 seasons, they together have minimum 45% of this team's targets between just those two guys. And so I don't think Juju's going to come in there and take over that target volume that Tyreek had, because they're vastly different players. But I think when you talk about vacated targets, they can definitely be a cruel mistress, and it's very dangerous to be translating those from one year over to the other. But I think on teams like Kansas City, where you have continuity at the offensive coordinator position, continuity at head coach with Andy Reid, continuity with Patrick Mahomes, and Kelsey and Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and kind of like a bunch of these pieces coming back, I think you can take a little bit from vacated targets and see what we might be able to expect from these guys. And I think if this pass catching corp stays as it is, Juju's kind of a lock for 100 targets in this offense, which is a way better offense than what we've seen him in Pittsburgh the last few seasons. So I think the resurgence is on. You talk about those dynasty truthers, Ty, and I think I'm probably teetering on being in that camp, and I think that's totally okay. So I think Juju did well to go to Kansas City, and I think he's up for a big season. Remains to be seen if they add again, because I definitely think they're going to be players in that market, but I don't necessarily know if a rookie is going to come in and move that needle as hard as we might want Juju to
and that I guess that's where I differ from the market a little bit. Like I just don't see what needle he's moving. Like he's just a guy who, like, I almost feel like they're gonna have some pretty defined roles in this passing game. It's gonna be definitely different without Tyreek Hill, just in terms of distribution, but I really just see him as their slot wide receiver for most of the time, and that won't be true when Travis Kelce's playing out of the slot. So I just think Juju's kind of pigeonholed in this role, and I think they proved it by bringing in MVS, and they have Mecole Hardman, who can do a lot of the Swiss Army stuff that Tyreek Hill did, and run the deep routes, which is more important and much more compatible to spiked weeks for fantasy football.
Yeah, no, I think definitely see that about the spike weeks. I think where I come at it from is just more that the fact that MVS and Mecole Hardman are the only ancillary pieces kind of locks Juju in as that guy who's going to soak up 110, 120 targets potentially. And I think that's fairly valuable in this offense, even if Juju doesn't make a bunch happen after getting those targets. You know what I mean? So I just think he's going to take some of that work, and it's going to be fairly valuable with these guys. So when we get down to those ancillary pieces though, Ty, brass tacks, Mecole Hardman or MVS for 2022, everybody's got to know.
Oh my gosh, I have no idea, to be honest. I guess I'll take Mecole Hardman just because he's been in the system. He knows Andy Reid's system and has a little bit of rapport, and he's flashed some efficiency in the league. So I'll probably just take Hardman, but I actually really like MVS in this spot. Yeah.
Same.
I think the answer is both.
I think so. I think so too. Yeah. And I think I might put MVS a little bit over top, because much like we were saying with Van Jefferson, the Chiefs are always trying to find that guy who's going to put Mecole Hardman in the dirt. And I think that's what the MVS signing does, is a lack of confidence in Hardman's ability to be that deep threat guy for them, Okay. So let's do a little bit more quick fire. We got Russell Gage here, Ty, going to Tampa Bay. We touched on him at the top of the show. Obviously, Chris Godwin and Mike Evans are there. We're looking at Rob Gronkowski potentially coming back. I don't think that's been made official, but there's obviously been whispers of it with old Timmy Brady coming back. What's your quick thoughts on Russell Gage coming in as the wide receiver 3 in that offense?
Yeah, I think he could get significant playing time, especially early on in the season with Chris Godwin.
Yeah.
His health is a concern, right? So I think, and he's always an injury away kind of style. It's a very deep wide receiver room. There's no doubt about it. But I think Russell Gage can definitely serve a niche. How valuable is that niche for fantasy? Because I think he might be a guy who actually gets priced up a little bit.
Yeah.
Because I've read a lot of buzz about him, and rightfully so. I think he is wide receiver 4 maybe. In that range, like I'd take him probably over Hunter Renfrow all of a sudden. You know what I mean? I'd take him right around Odell Beckham, I think, right at this moment, because of his injury status. I think Russell Gage is right around there. Like a Kadarius Toney, I'd probably take ahead of him. Christian Kirk, I'd probably have below him if that's
Yeah, no, I think that's a pretty fair assessment without having my my rankings down at that level dialed in. Yeah, but sounds like a pretty accurate tier for him. I think like to see anything reliably where I could say that he could be a wide receiver 3 for your fantasy team, I think he needs to see an injury or a lack of health above him on the depth chart, unfortunately, which we never wish for because we like Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. But like you said, Chris Godwin could be a little shaky for the start of the year after that late season injury, and Russell Gage would be a huge benefactor of that. We've seen wide receiver 3s flash in this offense. I don't think we're going to see kind of what we saw with Antonio Brown where he eats into those big studs. You know what I mean? Russell Gage is not necessarily on that level. So I think that's kind of what we're trying to say is like he's not going to come in and necessarily be a guy who could 3 games in a row be the second target on this team with a healthy Godwin and Evans. That's kind of where I'm coming from.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if he gets a lot of run.
Yeah,
like Brady loves the slot wide receivers, and Godwin is very versatile. He can play outside, so they've got a lot of 3 wide receiver sets. I think he could be. I worry about the ceiling. I guess. Like I think he's going to be a decent PPR play. I just don't know if the big plays are going to be there. The touchdowns definitely won't be. I don't think.
No, for sure. So speaking of big plays, a guy who we kind of expect those and maybe nothing else out of is DJ Chark signing in Detroit. Obviously, everybody loves their Amon-Ra St. Brown. Maybe a little bit too much in my book right now as far as the cost on him. Obviously, TJ Hawkinson, we're hoping for a little bit of that bounce back as kind of the top 7 in that second, maybe third tier of tight end. And then DeAndre Swift, people have him as like a top 5 dynasty back, and rightfully so, as do I. What do you think about DJ Chark coming into this offense? Because you look at the quarterback position, and it's a little bit glaring that Jared Goff doesn't seem to fit what DJ Chark does. So what do you think about that coming in? Do you think we're going to be disappointed, or could DJ Chark be that guy who gives us that, high-end wide receiver 3 production in Detroit?
Maybe at the end of the season, based on 3 or 4 big games, who knows? I just don't think we'll be able to predict when those games come. And I couldn't have said it better. Like DJ Chark and Jared Goff's skill sets just do not align. And, ASB and Goff built quite the connection last year, and their skill sets do align perfectly. I actually really like ASB, so I could, if I squint, I could get him in my top 24, I think, at wide receiver.
You think so?
He's just one of those wide receiver options in that 4th to 6th round range where we should be hammering wide receivers. And I think Hawkinson, I think I'd take Mark Andrews, Travis Kelce, Kyle Pitts, Darren Waller, George Kittle, and then I'm probably taking Hawkinson there. And I think that he sets a new tier when we talk about Dalton Schultz, Dallas Goedert. We were talking about them earlier.
Exactly, yeah.
So I really like, and DeAndre Swift, I think, he's justifiably an RB1 in all formats for sure. Yeah,
absolutely. I actually have DeAndre Swift right now as my running back 8 for 2022. Yeah. And I think with some PPR smash, he could get up into that top 5 for this season. I
think just like Hawkinson, there's a bit of a tier break too. Like after DeAndre Swift, I start looking at guys like a Nick Chubb, maybe a rookie like Breece Hall or Saquon or Alvin Kamara, some guys with question marks, and I think DeAndre Swift is closer to the Joe Mixon, Dalvin Cooks, the Najee Harris tier that I have there.
Totally, yeah. So I look for DJ Chark to be kind of a mid to back end wide receiver 3, like you said, on the back of some spike weeks. So good best ball target if you can get him late enough. And Amon-Ra St. Brown, I felt like you said you could squint and get him in your top 24. I have him as my wide receiver 25 right now, and I thought I was kind of low on him because in drafts I've been seeing him go in like near that top 15 range, which is a little bit rich for my blood as a part of that Detroit offense with Jared Goff at the helm. It could be interesting to see them draft a rookie like Malik Willis at quarter or at 2 overall. I've been seeing quite a bit of buzz on that after his pro day, but we got to keep our eyes peeled. Jacksonville retooling once again seems like an annual deal. Christian Kirk got a ridiculous contract. I think he's like a top 10 paid wide receiver in the league. I have never been a big Christian Kirk fan. I am still not a big Christian Kirk fan in Jacksonville. Like I just think like, what is he going to come in and do? Be your slot guy with what you tried to do with Laviska, who should be a pretty talented guy who can do a lot of things out of the slot. Or are you going to come and use him as a deep threat, which I think he might be a little bit miscast as, and you have Marvin Jones there to be that for you. You picked up Zay Jones, who could potentially be a little bit of that as well. But what do you think about the Christian Kirk signing and then maybe pepper in a little bit of Zay Jones there?
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely team Christian Kirk over Marvin and Zay Jones. Yeah. I think in fantasy, they also signed Evan Ingram.
True
so
that.
And they definitely hate Laviska Shenault.
Yeah, looking to trade him potentially.
I don't know if I'm prepared to draft any of these players at cost or whatever. Maybe I'll draft them all at cost, if that makes sense. Like, I'm not looking to draft any of these guys in a vacuum, but if they're going to be so cheap, I do expect a pretty big leap from Trevor Lawrence in year 2. I'm kind of still baffled at how he had such a bad season. I know the Urban Meyer debacle and all that is baked into and just like the elevation in talent you're facing. But I was surprised that he didn't have more success. Definitely had a long stretch in the middle of the season where he just wasn't able to do anything. The touchdown passes were just a joke. And so I'm not rushing to draft any of these guys, but they're all actually really cheap is what I'm saying.
Yeah, fairly cheap. I'm not necessarily buying too much into the offense yet. I don't mind the additions that they had. Like, I don't mind the Zay Jones one, although they paid him a fat contract as well. I think it's like 3 years, $30 million for Zay as well.
A lot of the money around is like kind of weird me out. Like even MVS, like the money made me. That's what made me really think about the Hardman MVS kind of. Yeah,
totally. Yeah, so they threw a bunch of money at it. So hopefully that can help for Trevor Lawrence. But I think for me, I would like them to have invested maybe a tier or two above the guys that they invested in to kind of surround him with maybe some more top tier talent, because I don't think that Christian Kirk and Zay Jones are necessarily a huge upgrade on what they might have already had in like a DJ Chark and Laviska, right? So that's kind of where I'm sitting. I'm not hugely buying in. Doug Peterson coming in on that offense. Old Jim Bob Cooter is I think the passing game coordinator. I was looking up the Jacksonville coaching staff, and old JBC is sitting there as the passing game coordinator. So I think that just adds value in itself, just the fact that he's there. So Zay Jones, I've always kind of liked him a little bit, but he's never really done a whole bunch. He had a decent little stretch towards the end of the season last year for Vegas.
He did.
And I think he comes in, and I don't necessarily think he's going to soak up a ton of target volume. I think if anything, he probably eats into Marvin Jones and whatever we might think Evan Ingram gets. So those guys will all kind of cannibalize each other. It really depends. So it depends. This team could go run heavy if they want to with James Robinson and Travis Etienne. So just an offense that I'm a little bit puzzled by, so I'm not necessarily attacking too much. An offense that we all should be attacking is the Buffalo Bills, Ty. We're getting ready to wrap it up here, but Jamison Crowder signed with Buffalo after Cole Beasley took his talents and his mic skills out of town in Buffalo. Jamison Crowder comes in as the slot guy, formerly soaking up 120 plus targets a year in New York for the Jets. And now he comes in, and it looks like the path is pretty okay for him as that guy who soaks up the niche slot role for this team. They got Stephon Diggs. They got Gabe Davis. Do you think Jamison Crowder is one of the final pieces that they're going to be adding, or do you think they continue to add to this offense? Kind of the late season Emmanuel Sanders ad like last season, but to me it kind of feels like Jamison Crowder is that ad for them right now, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and Isaiah McKenzie, like I like what Buffalo's got lined up. Like Gabriel Davis is going to take a big step, in my opinion. I think they're set at wide receiver if they want to be, and I don't think they're so top heavy that they can't go out and spend a day 1, 2, or 3 pick on, like a round 1, 2, or 3 pick on a wide receiver if they wanted to, and they also, I think we should monitor the running back position even more because J.D. McKissick fell through, and it's just a weird...
Duke.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, so Duke Johnson's going in there. So,
yeah.
But I do think that they might look to add a running back who has some pass-catching chops there. And Jamison Crowder, I don't think he's somebody that I'm too worried about, like, coming in and being a massive part of this offense. I actually didn't even see the money.
No, I don't recall the money
Jamison
either
Crowder,
right now. I think I have over the cap pulled up here somewhere.
Definitely needs to stay healthy. Like, what can you say about Jamison Crowder? He'll catch, a lot of the balls thrown his way, but he's just not going to give you very much. I think he averaged like under 9 yards per catch last year. So it's interesting to see what he's going to be able to do in one of the better passing games in football. That we have to remember also is without Brian Daboll, who's been, the other half of the Josh Allen story as the offensive coordinator, who obviously is now a head coach. So a lot of questions, and I think Jamison Crowder is not a guy I'm going to like try and put money on to
totally
just because that ceiling's not big enough for him.
Yeah, totally. There's like he's not that red zone weapon, exactly like you said, potent offense, but he's probably the least potent role within that offense. The contract is 1 season for $1.97 million, so not a ton. I think they have 1.8 million dead money if they were to cut him, but he could still like not make the roster potentially if he doesn't look very good or if he looks slow and old or something like that. So, interesting little ad there, and like you said, they might not be done with the draft coming up. Ty, that's all I really got for the wide receiver epi. I think that one is kind of the longest one that we're hoping to do out of this little series that we got going on for the trade and free agency impact. But that was a lot of fun, lots to unpack, and there could be a lot of moves coming in the coming days and whatnot, and those are ones that we'll kind of break down in future episodes. We've got quarterbacks and tight ends coming up next, and then we're going to do running backs after that, which is always fun. Still some more dominoes that could fall in that regard as well, Ty. So this was a ton of fun. Hope people got some value out of it. Please feel free to leave a comment on the YouTube channel. Let us know what you think. Make sure you're subscribed to that channel. Make sure you tell your friends to subscribe for us. We love it when we see new subscribers coming in. And yeah, leave us a comment and a like, and check us out on all your favorite audio platforms. As I mentioned at the top of the show, TrueNorthFFB.com is kind of where the whole gamut of True North content is housed. And we are the True North Pod. So find the brand on Twitter at TrueNorthFFB. The pod is at TNFF Pod. Which is an account that I have to get moseying on a little bit more. But Instagram too, I've been trying to pop some stuff up on there. So follow us there at TrueNorthFFB. The Gram, getting in with what the kids are doing in 2022, I guess. Although I'm not up to speed on TikTok yet, so I'm not going to be there. No, I can't do it, man. It's difficult. It's really hard. So any parting shots for the people, Ty?
No, all good. Pumped to do the quarterback soon, and pumped to really turn our attention to the NFL draft afterwards.
Oh, yeah, that's going to be a lot of fun. Some interesting rookies, interesting class. But yeah, until the quarterbacks and tight ends episode, we say peace.